Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? It's real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get together.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 2:30 out here on the West Coast. John Saponaro joining you from out here on the West Coast, Burbank, California. And that means my co-host, Matt Ibanez, holding it down back in New Jersey. Ibby, before we get into the conversation with our New York Mets, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. As always, weather over here is, up and down. It's freezing. I'm prepping for a snowstorm. Who knows if I'm going to have work tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But other than the frigid, other than the frigid conditions over here in Jersey, it's about as cold as the Mets hot stove right now because we're still waiting for some news, waiting for things to keep moving, unless this team is really set and we're going into Port St. Lucie. Since you can see from the thumbnail, Mr. and Mrs. Met have packed up all their things. They have made it to Port St. Lucie. Baseball is around the corner. Pitchers and catchers are near. And I don't know about you, John, but as fun as the hot stove season always is, as exciting as it is to land the great Juan Soto and Clay Holmes and everything that the Mets have done this offseason, I don't know about you, but I am ready to talk about some actual baseball.
Yeah.
Even if it means talking about guys playing in shorts and doing things on the backfields. I don't care. I'm ready to talk about some actual baseball as opposed to the what ifs and the nonsense that we're probably going to have to talk about today, even though I don't want to talk about it because there's nothing else to say. But we will do it because there are people that still have opinions on it. We will cover it. But other than all of that, Wednesday, red lights on. Let's have some fun. Let's have a show.
Of course, we are coming live to all you folks, courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Shout out to John Minconi. Shout out to everybody in the chat. We got Darren Rivera. We got Charlie. We've got D in the house. Who else we got? Try to do a roll call here off the top. We got Rosie. We got Carlos Ramos. We've got Brad. Armand is here as well. So many folks, familiar faces joining us. Douglas Barnes is in the house. We got Stanley Babich. I don't want to miss anybody. Aaron Manning, Zero Cool, Raph over on Twitter. A lot of folks, and I'm sure that number is going to continue to climb. Before I address anything, Ibby, I do want to say this from Darren Rivera saying, please like and subscribe to Til Mets Do Us Part. Yes, please go ahead and do that if you have not done that already. I think everybody here in the comments, they've done that because in order to comment on the live show, you have to have subscribed to this show. Ibby, I think baseball has a real problem with the offseason. I think that's not news to anybody. I don't know how you can fix it. I don't know if it's fair to apply a deadline to guys who are making, in a lot of cases, life-changing decisions for them and their families financially. You're not talking about the guy who maybe is on the back end of his career, like a JD Martinez or a Justin Turner, who's going to sign, one or two more contracts. And, you go play somewhere for a year and it kind of is what it is. And if you want to play it all, whatever, it's kind of up to you and you can make it work. You're a baseball lifer. But for these guys, the Juan Sotos and even the Pete Alonsos, the Alex Bregmans, who are signing 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, dare I say 15 years, you can't rush them into doing it. And the reason why I bring up even Soto is because couple of years ago, Manny Machado and Bryce Harper, their free agency lasted into February. They were down to the wire. They were signing these big, 10-year deals or whatever it was. So I don't think it's fair to rush these people into making these decisions. But baseball has taken something that so many people love. Even casual fans of baseball love to play GM. Everybody on this show loves to play GM, you, me, the people in the comments, but they've stretched it to a point where it's too much of a good thing because I don't care. On February 5th, I've got fatigue, and it's not just about Alonso because this market hasn't fully developed and it hasn't been what he wanted it to be. It's any of these guys. Now, look, the Mets aren't really tied to Alex Bregman, and he's not going to come here more than likely, so he becomes immaterial. But, that just speaks volumes to it. I don't care if Alex Bregman goes back to Houston. I don't care if Alex Bregman signs with Toronto to bolster that team as that team tries to make a run in a very weak AL. I don't care if he goes to Detroit, which is where he probably should go as they try to bolster their team with a great pitcher and some great pieces around him. I just don't care anymore. And it's funny because February and March is where you should be caring the most because there isn't real baseball to talk about. I'm not a March Madness guy. I know a lot of people are. It's not really for me. So, to watch spring training baseball, it's exciting for the first week. And then after that, even spring training baseball runs its course. So you would think that this stuff being a little bit longer than it normally lasts would be a positive, but it's somehow a negative because there is no movement. Every morning I wake up on the West Coast, 3 hours behind whatever is going on the East Coast. So even if I wake up at 6 a.m., there could be legitimate news that has happened out of Mets land. And I wake up and I turn off my alarm and I go pour some coffee. And then I look at my phone, I look at my Twitter, I look to see if there's notifications from you saying we signed Pete Alonso, and there's nothing. And not only is there nothing, but there's not even any news about movement. And so and again, this is not a Mets specific thing, but baseball has ruined something that it should be fun. And I don't know what the fix is. In fairness to baseball, I don't know how you fix it.
It's a near impossible fix because you're never going to have a deadline. You're not going to have things set because then you're going to have it where owners bleed out the players like they're doing now, bleeding them out to the point where you accept what I'm saying. Otherwise, you don't have a job essentially. So and Ken Rosenthal hit on that too this week on Foul Territory, where he was asked the question about what can you do to improve things. He's like, look, a lot of these teams are doing what they're allowed to do within the parameters of how things are set up, and that's just bleeding players out, saying this is our offer, take it or leave it, and we're going to wait you out, and we're not going to bend. We're not going to bend the knee to you. This is it. What are you going to do? And it sucks for the player because it gets to a point where when you are that ilk of player, and I'm not even talking about the Alonsos or even the Bregmans, or even to a lesser extent the Nick Pavettas of the world. Not even that. I'm talking about the middle to lower tier guys that's just trying to get on with a team, and they're looking for major league deals. And these teams basically say, no, screw you. Take our split deal, take our minor league deal, whatever it is. And these guys are trying to get some sort of cash, and they get bled out because otherwise they're going to be left without a job because others are going to jump them to accept what's being offered. It's a shit show all around, and it's unfortunate. But to the point you were saying before, I am beyond tired, man. Like I said, we get to the point even on this show when we are talking about spring training. Yeah, we're excited about our first 2, maybe 2.5, 3 shows within spring training. We're all right, let's get to the regular season. I'm done with this. I don't need any more. But this is
spring training is exciting right now. Before spring
is.
Training starts, and when it first starts, it's exciting. First, full squad workout is exciting, and then the first week of games is exciting because it's just oh my god, it's baseball. Especially if you live where you live and it's cold and you're gearing up for blizzards. It was 80 degrees on Sunday, and I played a doubleheader for softball. So look. I'm not trying to rub it in your face. I'm just saying,
no, I get it. Yeah.
It's okay, I have summer weather. But if you don't have summer weather, you look and you're like, man, there it is. And it's baseball and it's great. And it's cool.
Spring. Yeah.
But then spring training is too long, but we understand why it's too long because pitchers need to get up to speed. We understand that. But you're right. So to have this second little lull right now is kind of Look, we're always going to do this show. We don't take a lot of time off from doing this show because it's fun and we love interacting with each other and the chat and everything. But like, you could justifiably take some time off. That's how much of a second lull this is. And that sucks for baseball. They have an issue.
Yeah. And then obviously, like, I want to talk about different things when it comes to our Mets, but it's kind of difficult right now because of the black cloud. And I will call it a black cloud because that's what it is with the whole Alonso stuff, because we could be thinking about other stuff, but that's still like hanging over you. It still puts out questions. Like, it's difficult for us to talk about the lineup. It's difficult for us to talk about what the expectations could be. And look, I love the fact that I know people hate projections, but I like diving deeper into projections and seeing the numbers. And I know Pacoda's projections came out and they have the Mets at like whatever it was, 89 wins. I know Vegas has the Mets at over under 91.5 wins. I know that some of the projections for given players have come out too when it comes to strikeouts and home runs and overall offense. Look, the Mets offense right now, without a Pete Alonso even in it, is projected to have the fourth highest weighted runs created plus in baseball, I believe, fourth or fifth. So it's like, okay, like people want to hate on this lineup in general, but according to projections, yes, they're just that, projections. But still, that's pretty damn good, in my opinion, when you're fourth or fifth in overall when it comes to baseball, when it comes to what they think you can do from an offensive standpoint. But no, I am beyond taxed. And I won't lie, like, I'm excited to always do the show, but even coming into this, we talked about it in pre for a minute. It's like, man, what the hell are we going to, like, I was driving.
Oh no.
Going to talk about, because there's really nothing going on. We can poke and pry. We can talk about Dylan Cease. We can talk about the Padres. We can talk about that stuff, which is fun to do. And I did put out a poll on our community page, which got over 130 votes. I'm going to talk about those results shortly. There's a poll in the chat right now. It's the same exact one that I put on the community page. And I want to see if there's a difference from when I posted that and those results, and if it differs for the people that are here live. So if you're on the YouTube side, make sure you put in your vote. If you're not on the YouTube side, make sure you head on over to YouTube, sub the channel, put in a vote. And that question that I asked would be, would you do this deal? The Mets get Dylan Cease. The Padres get Jose Butto, Luis Angel Acuna, and Drew Gilbert. It seems like it's a lot. Your two options, yes, team needs an ace. No, that's too much. So I'm going to let these votes continue to pour in and see where it goes. And then once I get a higher count on that, I will then comp it to the results that we got on our community page.
All right. And you know what? I'm going to hold off on answering that.
Okay.
Myself, just because we'll talk about it in a little while. Yeah. Let's start with the thing that nobody wants to talk about, which is the Pete Alonso situation, just because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. And there's not much that can be said that we didn't say last week, that other great creators didn't say, but it needs to be said a little bit because, here we are knocking on the door of spring training. And, we've got the team ready to head down to Port St. Lucie, and other people have already been down there. Clay Holmes has been down there since goddamn December, basically, working out. And so I think at some point you have to put a deadline on it. And that's what I'll say, because look, you look at Brad says, yeah, this Pete drama needs to end this week or Monday after the Super Bowl. And then you have Goomba999 saying, I'm starting to think the Pete signing depends if Vlad signs the extension. If he signs with the Jays, Pete will get more years. If not, Pete gets 1 to 3. They're waiting on Vlad. I don't agree with the middle part of this, saying that Pete will get more years if Vlad signs with the Jays. But I do agree that he's probably waiting this out now if you're Scott Boras. Now, I don't know if there's a real offer. I don't care if there's a real offer from Toronto. I don't care if the Mets offer is off the table. I don't care if there's a real offer from the Angels. I don't care about any of that anymore. We've talked about that ad nauseum for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I still think the best road for Pete Alonso and for the Mets is for Pete Alonso to come back to the Mets, at least for the 2025 season. Now, if that means for the 2025 season on a 1-year deal, which I don't think is super likely, great. If that means 1 year, an opt-out after 1 year on a 3-year deal, fine. If it means a straight 2-year deal, fine. If you have to throw in a sweetener and add a 4th year that vests and also give him an opt-out, I don't care what the position of the the look of the contract is, I will sign any deal from 1 to 4 years, begrudgingly on the 4th, that gets Pete Alonso back to the Mets to give them the best lineup they could possibly roll out in 2025. But this has to end at some point. And what I want to say is what I said last week. February 17th, just under 2 weeks away, is the Mets' first full squad workout. It is President's Day. It's a Monday. If I were David Stearns, and I have no evidence that this is what they want to do, I have no insider information that this is what they are doing. If I were David Stearns, I would put a deadline of that day. I would put a deal back on the table if there isn't one. And right now, all reports say the Mets have pulled their deals. Mm-hmm. I would put a deal on the table. And maybe even 2 deals, like a structure of like, hey, you know what? Come back for 1 year. This is the term. Or come back for, 3 years. We'll give you a 4th year option. We'll also give you an opt-out after 2 or whatever. These are the 2 structures. Pick one. You have till February 17th. That's what I would do. Because I think at this point, you need to put a deadline on it. Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want the Mets to get into spring training and move Mark Vientos to first base, to then sign Pete Alonso 2 weeks later, to move Mark Vientos back to third base, to then have Brett Baty taking reps at third, to then move Brett Baty out of the plans, to have Luisangel Acuna be your backup second baseman. But no, now Luisangel Acuna is taking reps at third because you move. I do not want to put the team in turmoil for Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is an important part of this team, but he is not the most important part of this team. I'm a Pete Alonso fan. I've advocated for this guy, but the team has moved past Pete Alonso. There was a time when it was Pete's team. It is not Pete's team anymore. It is Francisco Lindor's team, and then next it is Juan Soto's team. And if Pete doesn't want to deal with that, if Pete can't handle that, if Pete wants to just go get the most money, if Pete thinks there's a better offer, good luck, God bless, go take the money. But I don't think there's a better offer, because if there were, he would already have signed it. There is no better offer from a bad team like the Angels, who makes bad offers to everybody. There is no better offer from Toronto. And I don't think he's going, like I said last week, I don't think he's going into a better situation if he went to either one of those places. The Angels are one of the worst run organizations in the sport. And who knows what Toronto is going to be after this year. If Pete goes there, could they have a little bit of a resurgence from Max Scherzer? They've got another year of Chris Bassett. They got Kevin Gausman. They just signed Santander. They still have Vlad. They still have Bo Bichette. They still have George Springer. Could they have a good season in a weak AL? Sure, they could. But then does he want to be there for the next 3 years? If Vlad leaves, or even worse, if Vlad stays? Where's Pete Alonso going to play? Is value going to get any better as a DH? Doubt it. Where do you play Santander, Vlad, and Pete? How do you make that work long term? So he's not helping himself. It's not to say take a better deal or take a less deal to come back here, but I don't think there is a better deal. And I don't think there's a better business decision for Pete Alonso than coming to the Mets. And if I'm David Stearns or if I'm Steve Cohen, that's exactly how I'm placing this. So I don't know if you agree or disagree. I've never negotiated with a Major League Baseball player. I've never been in a front office, and I've never been an agent for a player, and I've never been a player. But I would say, here's a short-term deal, 1 year. This is the dollar amount. Take it or leave it. And then throw in this second deal that's 3 years, or the 4th year with the sweetener that's got opt-outs, and just say you can take option A, option B, or option C, which is none of the above, and you have until February 17th. If cleats hit the dirt on February 17th and you have not signed it, it is over. And then if I'm the Mets, I just pivot, and whatever the pivot is, honestly, at this point, maybe I'm good with. I don't even like Brett Baty, but if they want to do a youth thing, do a youth thing. If you want to go get Ryan Mountcastle, fine. If you want to trade Brett Baty for Spencer Torkelson and just see if that works, fine. I don't care. I just can't do this anymore because I don't want it to upset the fabric of the rest of the team. It's coming to a point now where it is not fair to anybody else, mainly Mark Vientos, for this to drag out any longer.
I think everything you just said was very well articulated and put across perfectly. I agree with you that a deadline should be set. Honestly, I'm to the point where like I'm beyond even that deadline. Like as if I would have set the deadline already just to move forward, because you still want to have time to get something else done so that you can get a given player into your camp and get things rolling. But I am operating as a fan, at least right now, as if he's not going to be here. Mainly because, like I said, I'm tired. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm going to start looking at other things. But you're right. It's unfair to Mark Vientos, and the footage that I did see posted, it was him working at third base. So it's not as if they had him at first. Now, look, he might be doing a little bit of split. We have no idea. I saw him working at third base. Maybe that means that they would try Baty at first, or if they would make a deal. I don't know. Do I like the idea of Brett Baty in the lineup on opening day? No, I don't. But it's bad all around, in my opinion, because I get people in the chat who have said, Bryce Harper didn't sign until the first week of March and things of that nature. That's Bryce Harper. It was different circumstances. For some reason, the owners bled out Bryce Harper, of all things, which gave the Phillies a steal of a deal on a superstar for the next 13 years. So there is a difference there a little bit. But the main thing here with Pete is there is nobody else. Everything else is rumor. There's no other team that he wants to go to other than the Mets. But the issue that I have is that we cannot find any resolution when it comes to a deal when there is literally one player and one team in said negotiations. There's nobody else. And I said last week, and I'll stay with this because it's true, this is going to continue to drag on because now the only card that Scott Boras has to play is to take this into spring in hopes that either A, the Mets' eternal options are just not panning out well. Mark Vientos looks rough at first base. Brett Baty's not hitting the ball well. He's pounding the ball into the dirt. And now he's going to come back and say, look, my guy's still here. Pay me my money.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me ask you this question because I'm happy you brought that up. But here's the thing. Boras can do that if he wants. Mm-hmm. And we understand that the Mets are trying to be as competitive as they can, and it's going to look bad, and there'll probably be some fan base pressure, and I hate Brett Baty. If these options don't look good, he's going to push that on David Stearns. But I don't think that's going to make David Stearns or Steve Cohen fold. And I don't think they should. Like, in other words, I don't think a bad spring training from Brett Baty, who's had great spring trainings and bad seasons and great AAA numbers and bad major league numbers, I don't think a bad spring training is going to make the Mets go, oh my God, now we need Pete Alonso so much, let's give him 5 years. It shouldn't make you want to add 2 years to a deal that you don't already want to add. Yeah. I don't think it will. So I think he's overplaying his hand is what I'm saying.
Right. And I don't think that it would even be to that extent where it's like you're going to give the guy a 5-year deal. It might be to just bring back the offers that they had pulled. So it's like he has nothing on the table right now, according to reports. Like there's nothing there. So he literally is fighting for someone to give him some sort of money. And maybe, he wants them to bring back that 3-year deal. But like I've said before, either way, no matter what happens, if he's here, if he's not, it's either the end of Pete Alonso or you're getting one more year of Pete Alonso. That's it. Because once he comes back here and he opts out, because that's what's going to happen, they're going to want some more money. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on how he does. But I do think regardless, it's either the end of Alonso now or you get one more ride with him for 2025, and then he's gone. Because I said this over a month ago when we were talking about contracts. I said,
oh, no. I don't know what happened to Ibby, you guys. He's gone. He was on his way to a great point, I'm sure. We'll get Ibby back here in a second as soon as he sorts out whatever's going on with his internet. That was a bad dropout, guys. That was a bad one. That was mid great point. So I'll jump into the comments, talk to you guys for a little bit until Ibby gets back. Look, a lot of people kind of sharing the sentiment. We got Ethan KL saying, I think they should be looking into Mountcastle, Torkelson. Alonso is a distraction at this point. I do like Mountcastle better than Torkelson. Obviously, Torkelson has the higher upside. I think Mountcastle is kind of what Mountcastle is. which is a lesser player than Pete Alonso, but he does some things better than Alonso too. He'll hit for a higher average, but he's not going to hit as many home runs. Obviously, his ceiling is probably in the 20 range, whereas, Pete obviously can wake up and hit 40 one day. And look, Torkelson had one really, really, really good year, but Torkelson's also an interesting case. You got to remember, he was drafted after the COVID season, and, I know he was a high draft pick by the Tigers, but hard to evaluate those guys with, out actually having a season in college ball. So look, I don't know what Torkelson is. After that one really good home run and RBI output year, he's been very, 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 very bad. Would I be mad at a change of scenery swap? I wouldn't be. I'd say go ahead and change scenery with him and Brett Baty. Now, I don't know if Brett Baty even gets it done. It's just that seems like something that two teams would want to do, right? Our quote unquote problem for your problem, right? We'll give you this guy, first round pick. He hasn't worked out. You give us that guy, first round pick. He hasn't worked out, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if he really fits the needs of the Tigers at this point. That is Brett Baty, but I think it's something that you entertain. I think either way, you're bringing in a guy to the mix. Let's say Mountcastle. He would have a clear advantage to play first base, but you're bringing in a guy that you now add Mountcastle to the combination of Vientos, Baty, Acuna, Mauricio in this first, third combination, and you just see what sticks. Obviously, Torkelson is more of that kind of player where it's not going to be a guarantee. With Mountcastle, I think if you acquire him, you put him at first base and you kind of ride it out, leave Vientos at third. But again, you're not locking yourself into something long-term where you would be with either paying Pete $30 million or, acquiring Arenado and his contract, which is something I don't love, but is a direction you could go in if you wanted to. I hate it a little less than I did at the start of the offseason. At the start of the offseason, I was like, look, Arenado is not a fit for this team. He doesn't make a lot of sense. I know he said he would waive his no trade clause to come here. To me, that doesn't mean a lot. But again, when you start doing the upside play and you start looking at, well, Colorado's already paying some of that contract. Maybe you can get, St. Louis to kick in money, I think would have to be part of that deal. And then you also give up kind of nothing to get him because you're taking money off of their hands. It's something I'm a little bit more interested in now than I was then because you have to be flexible. But whatever the case is, I agree with the second point here, which is that Alonso is a distraction, and I think he's going to continue to be a distraction moving forward. D saying we need Francisco Alvarez to have a big year. I think we do. I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid, but I think he can have a big year. I think that the injury last year was not the factor. I think he had a lot of bad at-bats and did not have a great time of it at the plate, but I do think that it was a factor. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh man, put all the pressure on Alvarez, but it would certainly lighten the load for Pete Alonso not being here if Alvarez could have a big year. So Ibby, while you were gone, just kind of talking to the folks here in some of the comments, you were on your way to making a really good point, and it dropped out right in the middle of it. I don't know if you know exactly where you were at, but if you want to pick up right where you left off, just give people a little reminder and just jump right back in.
I'm trying to think. I was hitting on where was I? I was talking about Alonso. Apologies, by the way. I had a quick power surge in the house, so I had lost power for a minute.
That's what I thought. The way it dropped out, I was like, this seems like everything just shut off.
Everything just shut off of me, so apologies for that. I honestly, I don't remember where I was. I was talking to Alonso.
If that's the case, let's get to some of these Alonso comments that I was ripping through, and then if it comes back to you, we'll just get there. This one from It's Always Amazing in Queens podcast is kind of going along with what I was just talking about.
Tone, what up, Tone?
Brett Baty, yes, Tone, what up? Brett Baty for Spencer Torkelson, find a way to get Cease and let's do this. We'll talk about Cease later on. The Baty for Torkelson thing, I was just saying, seems like something that on the surface could work. Former first rounder for former first rounder, hasn't worked. Change of scenery, guys. Carlos saying, I've already turned the page on Alonso. For me, bringing him back after how this has transpired would be a mistake and mess with the clubhouse. Brett Baty being a part of this team concerns me. The only thing I'll say to this for Carlos is I think the clubhouse would welcome him back because I think the clubhouse, one, and I know he's not necessarily the most affable guy that he puts out as far as his persona goes. I know he's not like absolutely beloved in the clubhouse, according to some people. Keith Blacknick, Media Goon, one of them, has always said that, but I don't think he's disliked. Mm-hmm. And I also think that the team wants to win, and I think they'll be happy to have a guy who helps them win. Pete Alonso will help them be better. So that's the only part of this from Carlos that I kind of disagree with. But I do think, to my point that I've been saying this whole time, I do think there's a point where it becomes unfair to the other people on the team and the other people in the clubhouse, most notably Mark Vientos. I don't really want to mess with the kid. And I think at a point, you have to realize that maybe Vientos is your future and Alonso is not your future. And you just have to go for what you have to, you have to take care of the guy who you know is going to be here. And so I do think there's some truth to this, but the part with me that I don't like is I don't think it messes with the clubhouse yet.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously people are curious about the clubhouse because of, you know, all of this has transpired. A lot of mud has been thrown. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but still it can become a little bit of a hairy situation. But again, like, does this really affect the relationship amongst players? I think a lot of players understand it's a business, and a lot of these things are, you know, they go back and forth. And I remember Shea asked me at one point earlier in the offseason if I thought that, you know, if Pete does come back after all this stuff, and this was months ago, thinking that this would get handled by now, and it hasn't, and it's gotten worse to this point, did I think that Pete would get booed from Mets fans? And I said, no, I don't think so, mainly because, you know, if he's a Met, he's here and you want him to do well. Are we annoyed about everything that's gone on? Sure, but I don't think like on opening day, the Mets home opener is going to get booed. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. Because I said I think Twitter is an echo chamber at times, or majority of the times, and the people at the stadium are different than the ones you see on Twitter 9 times out of 10. So I don't think there'd be that much of an issue. To bring it back to what Tone was saying about Torkelson, I'm not big on Torkelson because I question if he can really bounce back from what he was the one season in 2023 where he had 31 home runs. Change of scenery, maybe, but I also don't think that the Tigers would want Brett Baty. Not because of what Brett Baty has done, but mainly because I don't think he fits for them. I know that people say, oh, they're looking at Bregman, this, that. Like, Bregman's a different story.
Yeah. I agree. I did say a lot of that, by the way. Sorry if I'm repeating things, but taking on a Bregman is one thing to push down the likes of a, I think it's Jace Young. I always mix him up because Josh Young is the one in Texas. Jace is the one in Detroit. Yeah. So pushing him down for an Alex Bregman, that's a different story because you're taking on a World Series champion, an established guy, an AJ Hinch guy, like you're trying to change the culture and advance yourself. Would you take on a Brett Baty to then battle Jace Young? It's like, no, just let Jace run with it then. Like, if that's the guy you want to give an opportunity to, just do that. You don't have to give up an asset, even though it's one that has struggled. I'm not so sure that the Tigers would settle for that. I said before, and I'll continue to say it, if they give up Torkelson, they're going to want back an arm. Now, I'm not saying you have to give up Brandon Sproat for him. That's not what I'm saying at all. But would it shock me if they said, hey, you want Torkelson, give us Blade Tidwell? Like, that wouldn't shock me. And I don't think it's that far off of an ask, even though Torkelson has struggled to that point. But I don't think that Detroit is in that much of a hurry because based off of what I've said recently, that being that Colt Keith, even though he does have pedigree as an infielder and a bat, moving him to first base, they've still been hesitant to make him play or allow him to play against lefties. So they could still run out Torkelson as a platoon there, and that could be a reason why they don't choose to move him for something that doesn't really blow them away. I agree. I agree with that. And when I was saying I already said it, I just meant so that you knew where my perspective was. Obviously, you can feel free to agree, and we do largely agree. If they're going to trade for anybody, I would prefer Mountcastle over Torkelson. I think obviously Torkelson has the higher ceiling, but you know, Mountcastle is not a bad play. They both come with more than 1 year of control, which is important too. Obviously more years of control for Torkelson, but Mountcastle has this year and one more. So he does give you some options at play as you look to, 2026 and how you're going to build out your team and then what you do at first base then and what you do at DH and blah, 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 blah. I do think it's important to realize what you said about Torkelson being the other side of a platoon right now. I just don't think that they are, the Tigers, that is, 100% set on giving up on Torkelson. I think they would make it for the right. I think they would trade him for the right deal.
Agreed.
But again, I don't know if I want to give them, anything of significance. Like, look, would I trade Tidwell? I would. Would I trade him for Torkelson? I wouldn't. I wouldn't make that deal. Now Tone is saying Tyler McGill and Brett Baty for Torkelson. I would make that kind of a deal, but again, does that deal get it done? I don't think so. I just don't think they want Brett Beatty. So,
and on the opposite end, the Mets would probably say, we don't want to give you that much. And to us as fans, we would say, give it up. But at the same time, it's like, remember what you're getting. Like, and look, it's not something special.
Ibby, I want to remind everybody, this. I am not super high on either player. I never really have been. I did like Tyler McGill's upside for a while. I still think that he has not found a way to fully maximize his potential and his pitchability. I think there's something, but he's also, he's not getting any younger, and eventually a guy has to do it or whatever. But I just don't think I don't care if either one of these guys are traded. I just don't see the Mets giving them up for a guy who, had one good year, who might not be any. I don't see it being a match. It's not about the players. I just don't see it being a match.
Yeah.
And, I don't think these two teams match up the way people assume that they do.
And I would definitely be calling Baltimore, because I have no idea what Mike Elias is doing. He has been god awful, and the Orioles offseason to this point has been pathetic with the way that they've chosen to spend money. And I don't know what their plan is. They're blocking guys that are trying to come up. They're taking spots away from guys that they did call up. I don't understand why they're signing Tyler O'Neill's of the world, Ramon Laureano's of the world. Who was the other one? Seguno from Japan. There was one more guy that I'm very baffled at how they're going about spending their money. So there's a lot of corner infielders. There's a lot of corner outfielders, guys that could potentially fit. I think that the Mets can match up with them, but I don't know what they're doing. So who knows what they're eventually going to do.
Yeah.
But to bring up Tone's comment real quick, saying Mountcastle numbers have been dropping as well, if I'm not mistaken. Tone, if you're still here, you can double check for me, but I believe Mountcastle's numbers over the last 3 years, at least from the expected home runs total, he'd be about a 20 home run bat at City. I know last year he only had 13. All 13 would have gone out at City. I'm not sure if Mountcastle was hurt last year or because he was hurt by platoon time. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think he would be a solid fit. When I talked about last week, the overall flexibility, could play first base, could play left field. If things don't go right for Nimmo, if they want to keep Winker as a DH, there's ways that it can work, and his positional flexibility goes a long way, as well as the extra year of control. So I definitely would opt for him, and I think that deals could make sense with Baltimore. And again, I'm calling Baltimore because, hey, wilder shit has happened when making deals with people, and I don't know what the hell Mike Elias is doing, but he's lucky that Toronto keeps on swinging and missing, because if they weren't, then everyone will be ripping the fact that Mike Elias is wasting the cheap years of the players that he does have.
They have had one of the most confounding, this is the Orioles, off seasons I have ever seen. The Orioles were a perennial punching bag forever. They finally they finally succeeded on the Houston Astros plan of just being really bad, but being really good at drafting and developing. And they did. They drafted, they developed. Guys are coming to the major leagues. They're hitting on all cylinders. You've got all these young, cheap guys all at the same time. You make this all-in move. You go get Corbin Burns. Boom. Okay, great. You don't have the season that you're looking for, but now you've got new ownership, and you're like, no, we're going to keep these guys, and we're going to build. It is a weak a very weak AL. I understand that they're in the AL East, and so you always have to contend with the Yankees, regardless of whatever you think about the moves the Yankees have made and haven't made or whatever. They are still the Yankees. They figure out ways to win. They haven't had a losing season in like 35 years. They, barely missed the playoffs when they're just always in the conversation. But the rest of the league is weak. With all the wild cards, you can get in. Now, look, Baltimore might be good enough to get in anyway, but they have had such a strange offseason for a team that should be going the other way. Because for all the criticism that we put on the Detroit Tigers of the world for, hey, you've got this great pitcher and you've got some great young players. You really should be building this out. It's like, okay, well, they did. They went out and they got Glaber and they're making some moves. It's not the sexiest, but it's something. For all the criticism we've heaped on the Pirates, you have Paul Skeens. You have a finite amount of time to go out and win and be really good. Yes, that's all true. But those are two teams, especially one in the Pirates. They're still the Pirates. They still don't spend any money. They still have shitty ownership, blah, 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 blah. The Baltimore Orioles should be making a change. They should be trending in the other direction. And they have not replaced, Ibby, a thing that they've lost. They lose Burns, and I understand I was cautious to give Burns the kind of deal that he got on the Mets. I was cautious from a Mets perspective to give him that deal. So I don't blame any team to not go out there and want to sign that deal with Corbin Burns. But the team that he was on, the team that he pitched his ass off for, you might have to, especially when you don't have any other pitching to speak of, you might want to be inclined to spend a little bit of money there. They let Santander go, and I know they can afford to lose offense, and they can afford to lose a one-dimensional, highly paid player who's bad on defense. But they have not, Tyler O'Neill's a good get, but he doesn't replace Santander. I just don't know what they're doing. And this is not an Orioles show, but to your point, it could be really easy to get Ryan Mountcastle. It could be really impossible to get Ryan Mountcastle because no one knows. I don't think there's a person in baseball who can look at what the Orioles are doing and say, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense right now, right here. You're muted, so no one can hear you. You are fucking up today, man. You are fucking up.
Sorry. I apologize. I'm the worst. I know. I'm terrible. No, but just to end the point on the Orioles, it's like, yeah, if you don't want to pay Santander, fine. But if you don't want to pay him, then give that playing time to someone the ilk of Heston Kierstead. Give it to, you're allowing Colton Cowser to be completely comfortable in your outfield. You're finding time at DH for Sam Basayo or Kobe Mayo or whatever it is. Like, you have all these guys, you don't want to deal them for pitching because you refuse to, but then you're signing players to block them from actually playing and giving them the reps that they need to succeed. 0 cents, whatever. I would rather have Ryan Mountcastle in the end. I saw Tone's comment before talking about how, Torkelson is young. He, you can't sneeze at the 31 home runs that he did hit in the 23 season. And I agree. I'm very curious as to what exactly happened. There was somebody on Twitter, I'll have to find it, who did do a deep dive on Torkelson in terms of why things may have went south. I'll try to find that and I'll send it to you, Tone. I would love to recap it as well. And if I find it, in time for the next show when, we don't have any resolution on first base because it's not going to happen yet, I'll make sure to bring it up then as well. But this is a good one. The video, obviously, Mountcastle will be the choice.
This is a good one from Truman Quinn saying Arenado, Montgomery, and Pete returns are going to be awkward as fuck. I do agree. I think the most awkward one is Montgomery because Montgomery
that was very awkward.
Was very vocal about signing the deal, being unhappy with the deal, the timing of it, how it fucked with him. And then the team was like, yeah, we shouldn't have signed that deal. He sucks now. That one's going to be really awkward. Arenado, I think, is just the business of baseball. I think the Cardinals just don't want to spend any money.
He's going to be gone. Arenado's definitely getting dealt. Cardinals Live on Twitter, who I was very skeptical about in the beginning of the offseason because it felt like it was just another account trying to put stuff out there. But he's been ahead of the curve on everything Cardinal related. And a lot of the Arenado rumors, he's been a month in advance of people that are posting things now. He was posting already a month ago. So whoever this guy is, he's in the loop. The information he puts out there is good. He says that there is a lot of traction and a lot of smoke for Arenado to be got. And it looks like it's going to be Boston, which I still don't understand, but it's looking like it's going to be Boston because there's a lot of traction in the Bregman market, which takes Boston out on Bregman, which means a return to Houston for him or going to Chicago, that being the Cubs, seems to be the potential landing spot for him. But there's a lot of movement between those two players. They kind of play off of each other with how things are going to play out. But it looks like Arenado will be on the move, and Boston could be the place he ends up in.
Yeah, look, and I think that makes it a little less awkward for him, obviously, if he's dealt. But I just think it's the business of baseball. And I don't know if – and this is a great comment. It's funny. But I don't think it's going to be super awkward for Pete either. Again, unless it gets into like a weird territory. Like, I don't want Pete to sign like when JD Martinez signed. You know, like I just don't want that. I don't think the Mets need that. And like, look, do I ultimately think – I've said this the whole time. I have to be consistent. I think the best version of the 2025 Mets has Pete Alonso on it, at least to start the season. But we're getting to the point where the season is almost starting, and I just want it to be done. And I'm going to start to feel the other way if he becomes this kind of distraction, if he becomes a hindrance for Vientos. I don't want to move this kid all around, back and forth and all this. I also, and I don't know if this is a hot take, people are going to be mad at me for this. I don't think that Brett Baty is a markedly better third baseman defensively than Mark Vientos. There's been a lot of that put out by a lot of people.
No, we talked about this weeks
ago. It's a no-brainer.
It's
you move Vientos. Like I do think ultimately, yes, you move Vientos probably to first base. I understand why you do that, like with the configuration. And I get that there's a sense that Baty is the better defensive player. But I don't think it's true. I think people have that in their minds, but I don't think it's real. I know that some of Vientos's advanced numbers on defense don't bear out well for him. But when I watch them both play third base with my eyes, I don't think Baty is as good as people say he is, and I don't think Vientos is as bad as people say he is.
They're both poor at the position. One just might be a little bit more poor than the other. But still, it's not anything to really brag about. So I understand when people say that they want Vientos to stick at third because stop moving him around. If you have an option to get a better third baseman, I understand why David Stearns, who's establishing a ground ball driven staff, I understand why he wants strong defense at third base. So if the opportunity arises and it's there for him, I get it. I also understand why him seeing how the Alonso stuff is shaking out, thinking, okay, I can swing Vientos over to first and I can pick up a guy that can actually play third base at a more positive clip and it betters my defense and we will make Vientos work at first. Like I understand the entire thought process, but yeah, when it comes between the two of them, it's not that much of a difference to where Brett Baty at third is going to transform you. So I'm very curious to see if they do stay in-house, would they go the route of putting Baty at third, or will he continue to get reps at first because they moved around the time, and will they move Vientos or will they put him at first? Like I'm very curious to see if that does come to pass, how they would go about handling it.
Yeah, look, the Mets are not likely getting Arenado and the Mets are not likely getting Alex Bregman, nor really should they. But if you were bringing in one of those guys and that was your reason for moving Vientos to first base, I understand that. One, they're both great defensive third basemen, so obviously they're better than Vientos. And two, you would be acquiring both of them on a multiple year situation. You'd have to sign Bregman for, let's just say, 5 or 6 years, and you'd have to get the remainder of Nolan Arenado's deal, which I think is 4 years left, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think either one of those guys is happening, nor should it, but that's why you would move Vientos to first base. I don't think moving Vientos for the sake of Brett Baty makes sense. I do think, though, we were kind of looking at it maybe in a longer term view if you're the Mets, where maybe you do it with the eye on Mauricio eventually being a third baseman. That I could get behind because I think Mark Vientos is more of a first baseman than Mauricio is. So to me, Brett Baty, if you were to move Vientos, which again, I'm not in favor of doing, it would be because Brett Baty is the placeholder. I don't think Ronnie Mauricio is going to be ready to start the season. I don't think even if he's ready, he's gonna need time in AAA. He's gonna need time to get back in baseball shape, playing every day, hitting major league pitching in a meaningful way. I think Mauricio has a lot to offer as an offensive player, but I don't think that you should be banking on him. So I think if you're going to go that route with moving Vientos, you're not doing it for Baty, you're doing it for the next guy in line. I think that's the only saving grace, but I just think there's just been so much said about, oh, well, we know Baty's better. And I'm like, I don't think we do. And there's a lot of good creators saying it. People who I shout out, I've been listening to a lot of other Mets content the last couple of weeks, and like, really good shows, really good stuff from the Mets pod, from Locked On Mets, from everywhere. But there's been a lot of stuff that's just been like, yeah, well, we know Baty's better. We know Baty's a better third baseman. I'm like, no, he's not. I don't see it. I just don't see it. I can't get behind it.
Like I said, I think from the time that we saw Baty up here, what he provided at third base, like he had his screw ups too. I know Vientos had, I'm not trying to make it seem like Vientos is like this legit glove. I don't think he is, but at this point, when we're talking about a player in totality, like I look at Mark Vientos the same way that I looked at Daniel Murphy. It's like, I know he's not the greatest with the glove, but I love his bat. I love what he provides. And it's like, I'm willing to sacrifice in that position. And it's like, do I want to move that for a guy that might be lesser than him to make him learn another position that could, deter him even more or even take away from that offense that I see? Like, no, like it's one thing if it's an Alex Bregman, which it's not going to be. It's another thing if it's Brett Baty. So it's like,
yeah,
either way, it's going to be interesting to watch pan out. But for now, I'm going into this thinking that the Mets are more likely to keep Vientos at third based off of what's available to them. Keep him at third while trying to find someone that could fill in at first base.
I agree. Let's jump back into the comments. Charlie saying the late signing of JD Martinez affected Vientos last year. Late Pete signing would affect Vientos this year. Got to give the kid a break. I think that's fair. I think you're asking a lot from him. This has been my thing the whole time about not wanting to move him, even when we were earlier in the offseason and there were other reasons. Again, the Mets aren't getting Alex Bregman, but there was, the Mets are linked to Alex Bregman. They want to do this. And you made a good case as to why. But I think you got to give the kid a break. You're asking him to do a lot. Move positions, fill in for Alonso, not have a sophomore slump, protect Juan Soto. I think he's capable. I think the bat plays, but I think you need to remove some of those variables. And I really don't want to mix in, play first. Actually, no, we signed Pete, move back to third. I think it's too much. Ibby, let's head into the break.
Yeah.
Let's try to reset a little bit. I want to put this Pete stuff to bed because there's just nothing else we can really touch on with regards to him
Agreed.
right now. There might be like an offshoot commentary we can get into, but I don't want to talk about Pete Alonso anymore. We'll talk about Dylan Cease out of the break. I know it's a bit of old news, but I think it's still worth talking about because I think it's still possible, if not now, at some point in the near future. And I think there's other stuff we can get into with, how the Mets, team actually shakes up the way it looks right now. So if you're watching for the first time, you don't want to sit through a break, don't worry. It is just a quick 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So it's John Saponaro, it's Matt Ibanez, it's Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. We'll be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Til Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, like we are each and every single Wednesday, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. If you haven't, go ahead and throw a like on the video. It helps the algorithm, helps people find us, other fellow awesome Mets fans like all of you. If you're watching in the live stream and you're commenting in the live stream, you are already a subscriber because we've set that as a condition, but you know that the live comments is a huge part of this show. It has been for the last several years. We want to continue to grow that. So subscribe to the channel, jump in on the live. We want to hear from you, especially now, February, March. This is a great time to have a bit more of an open forum, even more than we typically have. We'll get into some of that, towards the end of this show here today. But we understand that it's hard to join the live stream every single week and give us an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of your time. If you miss any of the show, if you're a subscriber, you'll get alerts. You've got notifications on. It'll say, hey, you know what? You missed the Til Mets Do Us Part live. You can go back and you can watch anything that you've missed, whether you had to leave early or you got in here late. And if you can't do any of that, this will drop tomorrow morning as an audio podcast on all of the platforms that you know and love. So you can subscribe there. You can throw a rating on the show if you'd like as well. A lot of people have taken to watching the show, interacting live in the show, but we do have a good group that still listens to the audio show. But that means that the ratings are not low. They're just not coming in as ferociously as they did when we first started and we were audio only. So please, if you like what you're listening to, help us out with a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify specifically. That will really go a long way. I don't think I missed anything, but Ibby, before we get back into the conversation, let's hit him with a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes, fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And as always, spend $99. That's what you're doing when you go to Independent Safes. You get free shipping. They take care of you. Tell them that Til Mets sent you. And this week, I am officially putting Pete Alonso, Scott Boras, and this entire negotiation in the Independent Safe. And I am done locking it, throwing it away into the ocean, not even the river, into the ocean. And I'm just done with it. I don't need to talk about it anymore until this guy actually makes a decision on what he wants to do. So that's my plan. Once I get my Independent Safe in the mail sent to me, thanks to free shipping, okay? Tell them Til Mets sent you. They'll take care of you. That's it.
Carlos agreeing with you. He said, please, let's lock this entire Pete convo in an Independent Safe. I agree with that. Ibby, here's a good one that Tone brought up right before the break, and this is tangential to Pete, but it has nothing to do with Pete, so I do want to pick up the conversation right there. Followed it up by saying, legit question, guys, saying Winker at first base. I do think, and I know he was asked about this at Amazing Day. He said he would get a first baseman glove. He said he would do whatever it took, whatever the Mets asked him to do. I don't think there's harm in getting Winker some reps at first base. I obviously think if you're an outfielder, you're even a bad one, you're athletic enough to play first base. So I don't think it's crazy. Here's the one thing I would throw out as caution. The Mets have, whether you like it or not, whether you agree or not, a very good platoon if you look at the numbers at DH. They have the strong side hand in Winker, and then they have the weak side with Starling Marte. If you go back to last year, when healthy, Winker on both teams, the Mets, Marte just on the Mets, their splits against opposite-handed pitchers would put together a terrific platoon at DH. You're talking, I had the numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. It's like over 20 home runs that you're looking at. You're looking at a batting average in the high 280s or something like that. Like, it's good. It's a good combination of players. So, trying to put Winker at first base in any kind of prolonged stint means that you're going to face Winker more against left-handed pitching than you feel comfortable with, and you're going to face Marte against more right-handed pitching than you are comfortable with on a more consistent basis. Could you do that every once in a while? Sure. But you can't. That is not a recipe for success. Both players' overall numbers will suffer, and I think you're going to get a less productive, less healthy version of Starling Marte the more he plays even if that is not playing the field and just DHing. So I like giving Winker a first baseman's glove in a pinch, in an every once in a while situation, but I don't think it's smart to say, hey, let's do this and run with it, which I'm not even sure Tone was suggesting here, but I think that's the thing you have to be careful of. And I apologize for not having all of the numbers on those platoon splits, but I assure you they are very, very, very good.
Yeah, and like you said, in a pinch, I don't mind it. And I, obviously he said during the Mays Day, like you mentioned, he would be willing to do it or try or do whatever he can to help the team, which is what you want to hear a baseball player say. But I also think that David Stearns is about maximizing guys in the spots that he thinks that they're going to succeed in the most. And I don't know if that's the spot for him. Sure, you like to see Winker's bat in the lineup consistently. And I think you will from the DH spot for the most part. But I really think that they will opt to go the route of finding someone for first base if Pete does not come back, essentially. And that, whether that is staying in-house with Vientos or Baty or going out and bringing in either via trade, the Torkelson or the Mountcastle route, or even signing an elder statesman like, show favorite, one of my favorites, Justin Turner, who's still hitting at the age of 40. Would that shock me? No, it wouldn't shock me at all. Because the guy can still put up numbers and he can still put up numbers in City too. So something like that wouldn't shock me if it came down to it, but I don't think that they would put him there as a solution, if you will. Like you said, pinch, something happens, God forbid injuries, like different story, different circumstances. But as an outright plan, I can't see that one.
Ibby, this is a comment from Tone that I think echoes the sentiment of a lot of people. And I don't think it's necessarily an unfair sentiment. As a matter of fact, right after he posted it, Richard Zucker posted something almost identical. And he says, it's a sad moment that feels like this team is incomplete heading into spring training. I don't think this is an unfair comment, and I don't think it's an unfair sentiment. I have said time and time again, I separate my fandom from my person with this platform. And so there are things that the Mets might do that I might disagree with, i.e., if they don't sign Pete Alonso, they might give an extended look to Brett Baty at third base. I don't like Brett Baty. I don't think he's going to be good. I don't think he's going to be good here, there, or anywhere else. I think he's a quad A player. You differ a little bit. You think a change of scenery might help Brett Baty.
Yeah.
And you just don't think it's ever going to work out here. Fine. I'm just using that as one example. My caution to this feeling for Tone and everybody who feels like this, and this is not me, I use that example because this is not me worshiping everything that David Stearns does. I think David Stearns is great at his job, and I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt, not only for his time with the Mets, but his career at large. He's always built very competent teams. It is very cool when you look at a team and you go, God damn, it's February 5th, and this team is going to be an absolute powerhouse. They're going to be great. They're probably going to win the division. They're probably going to get to the NLCS because that's how good they are. There's no guarantee of that. And so the fact that this team looks incomplete heading into spring training, I just don't think it matters that much. This team should be better than they were last year. Heading into the season, I think they have gotten better. And last season, however improbable, however unlikely, however crazy situations that it took to do it, they did make it to the NLCS. They were 2 wins away from playing in a World Series. So you just don't know. And I think Stearns knows that, understands that. It's hard to ask Met fans to be patient. I know I'm not a patient person in my fandom or in life, but this team is really good. And when the Mets need something, they'll go get it. The owner has shown that. The Pobo has shown that. So I get this sentiment, but don't worry about it so much. I just don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I think it really comes down to whatever your plan was as a fan that you put into your head, what you thought this offseason would be. And I think that's where it comes down to for a lot of people. Because this team is, as is going into the season already favored for more wins this year than last year, correct? Well, last year we were around 81. I think last year was 81 because I remember the bowl predictions. We both went over.
I took the over. I think I had them. I was 1 win away from whatever. What did they finish with?
What they get? 89 wins. I think you had. Did you have?
I had 88 wins and a wild card. Wins,
and I had 84, and I had them missing. That's where I had them. So, we're 8 games better in terms of where the over under was last year. I believe. Don't hold me to. I think that was what it was. But either way, I think this team. I understand people say they think it's incomplete, but I trust more than a lot of other Mets fans, mainly because I think that this front office has an idea and a much better grasp than we do when it comes to how they're developing at the major league level. Look, they still need help at the minor league level, and I've been saying that for years, and I'll keep saying that until I actually see something work. But I think that in general, they are looking for specific players, and if those players aren't there, they're not going to dive in and just take something just to take something. This was never about just 2025. It's about, in general, moving forward, what makes sense for this team. So I can sympathize with the person that does feel like it's incomplete. I don't have a problem with the pitching like other people do. That's not to say that I don't want Dylan Cease, because I will gladly take Dylan Cease. I will gladly take a Michael King. Like, I'm not saying I don't want them. You can never have enough pitching. But I don't have an issue with the pitching as much as other people do, because I believe in the pitching lab. Because if you are willing to bask in the glory, if you will, of the results of it last year, you can't rip it this year. Like, you just can't. Like, that's unfair, because you watched it succeed and now they're doing it again or trying to do it again. And you're just like, no, you can't do that. That's not how it goes. But other teams do that. The Giants do that when it comes to pitching. The Rays do that when it comes to pitching. The Cleveland does this when it comes to pitching. They just churn guys. Like, that's what the Mets are trying to be. They're trying to churn guys until they actually find a guy that's willing to, a guy that's willing, actually not a guy that's willing, but until they find a guy that they feel is proper to pay from a starting pitching perspective. Like, I'm not that worried about the arms like others are. And I'm definitely not worried about the lineup right now either, like some people tend to be, because like I said before, projections have them as the 4th or 5th best team in baseball from a weighted runs created plus standpoint. So I think the offense is going to be fine. Not worried about it. Does Pete make it better? Absolutely. Do I want more? Sure, I do. Anybody wants more. I don't want to make it seem like I'm just content, but I'm just also saying that if this is what it ends up, going into battle with this team, I'm okay with it. I get what you're saying though, John, where it's like you wish you could just be like, this team is just going to dominate. Like, everyone wants it. Like the Dodgers, like, this team's going to dominate. Like, yes, we all want that. But yeah, as we've said, this team is still working to get to that point. It's not there yet. People want it to be there, but it's not there yet. You don't want to hear time. You don't become that overnight. It doesn't happen that way. And you don't become that just by throwing a bunch of money. And someone's going to say in the comments, or someone's going to say if they hear this, oh, the Dodgers throw money. The Dodgers are in a different stratosphere. They've reached a point where they can do that, where it makes sense. And players are available when their time is now. It makes sense for them. Mets aren't there yet. They're just not.
Look, I agree. And I see a lot of the comments, Paul Revere saying, the Mets still need a legitimate bat protecting Soto. If not, Soto is highly diminished. They'll pitch around him all year and lead the league in walks. Juan Soto does not need a legit – listen, I believe in the concept.
He thrives regardless.
Yeah, I believe in the concept of protecting a player in the lineup. I think that you can really do some great things when your lineup is deep. And I think the Mets lineup could be deeper. But Soto will not be diminished. Soto was the second best player on the team, the Washington Nationals team that won the World Series in 2019. His first year basically in the bigs. The only reason why he wasn't the best player is that was Anthony Rendon's crazy walk year. And Soto hit 4th on that team. He did not hit with Rendon behind him. He hit with Ryan Zimmerman and Howie Kendrick, both at 35 and 36 years old behind him. Both guys only played a year in the major leagues. Now, look, they were good hitters still at that point. They were not Pete Alonso, though. They were not, some powerhouse stuff. Vlad Guerrero. Nobody was going to confuse them for the reincarnation of Big Papi Ortiz and Manny Ramirez. Juan Soto was 20 years old when he won a World Series. Do you have his numbers that year?
That the year they won the World Series. No, I was going to bring up the 2021 season on the 65-win Nationals. He batted .313, .465, .534 as a split line with a .999 OPS, 29 home runs, 95 RBIs. His protection that year was Ryan Zimmerman, who was on the back end of his career.
That was Ryan Zimmerman's last year because Howie Kendrick played in 2020. Ryan Zimmerman opted out because of COVID. And so 2021 was his last year when he was, a shell of his former self. If you go back to their World Series year in 2019, he put up a 5 WAR in 150 games played. He had 34 home runs, 110 RBI, 32 doubles, 108 walks, 282, 401, 548 slash line with a 949 OPS and a 142 OPS plus. That was, again, with either Ryan Zimmerman or Howie Kendrick hitting behind him.
I got one. Ready? The lineup protection for that 2021 team. Juan Soto had an over 1,000, near 1,200 OPS in the second half of 2021 with this around him. And this person was basically saying lineup protection is not real. Behind Soto, hell, in front of him, you had Victor Robles and Alcides Escobar. Behind him, you had Josh Bell, Yadiel Hernandez, Carter Kieboom, Luis Garcia Jr., Trace Barea, I don't know who that is, Lane Thomas, Gerardo Parra, Patrick Murphy, the skeleton of Ryan Zimmerman. Like, that's what you had behind them.
Yeah. And listen,
again, the guy's going to hit regardless.
Tone said, and yes, zero cool. Soto was the second best hitter on the 19 Nationals. Again, Anthony Rendon had an insane year, got himself that big contract, and has never been even a baseball player since. Tone, I understand that the 2019 Nats had pitching in all caps. Yes, they had Prime Scherzer. Yes, they had the last good year of Steven Strasburg. Yes, they had Patrick Corbin. I understand that, and I understand that that's a flip side to the argument. But my point is, from a strictly lineup protection point of view, to say that Soto will be diminished is absurd. Soto has never been diminished in his entire career. He has never been a diminished player. He had a down half season for him his first year in San Diego. Come on. I can't get behind it. I cannot get behind. I understand there are other factors in going into winning a World Series. I understand. I want the Mets lineup to be deeper. I do. But I don't think that Soto needs somebody else to be great. And saying it, he's saying it now. I agree. Soto will be Soto. Look, let's flip the conversation, Ibby, to the pitching side of it, because there are a lot of people saying that the Mets need to get better pitching, despite the fact that 2 years in a row, David Stearns has been forced to rebuild this rotation on the fly, and I think he's done a very good job of that. And to your point, the pitching lab deserves a lot of credit, because the pitching lab has already paid big-time dividends. When you look at the Mets' projected starting pitching and their depth, they're very deep, but they are not very top-heavy. I think the depth is very helpful. I think the lack of a true number one is a little overrated, because I think aces are overrated. But I also think you would like to maybe have a better singular pitcher at the top of this rotation. Right now, you have Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes. I think at times not throughout the entire season. I think at times the Mets will go to a 6-man rotation. And for that 6-man, you have the likes of Paul Blackburn, Griffin Canning, Jose Butto, Tyler McGill. I think 3 of those guys, definitely 2 of them, 3 of them potentially, those depth pieces will be in the bullpen and have the opportunity to spot start. I think that's how the Mets are going to use this bullpen. I think Butto is definitely going to be in the bullpen. I think Tyler McGill, who still has an option, will be in AAA, stretched out as a starter. And I think there's a situation where both Canning and Blackburn can be long guys in the bullpen that can also come up and be spot starters for you. I could also see a situation where Blackburn starts the year on the IL because of the back issue. So I think the Mets have a lot of options. They have a lot of depth, but they certainly don't have that one guy at the top. And again, excluding the fact that I think, and you tend to agree, that having an ace in modern baseball is a bit overrated, I think the Mets don't really have a true number 1, which is a little different from an ace. And I think that's where the Mets can improve. And I think that's why everybody got a little excited about Dylan Cease, about Michael King, and I think rightfully so. I also lobbied, as a lot of other people have, for Luis Castillo. I think the Mets need another person in the rotation at some point, either now or at the deadline. And I think the Mets are going to get that person eventually. Again, it might not come as soon as some people want it to. People want to see Cease on the team right now and blah, 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 blah. But I know it's hard to preach patience, but I think you have to be a little patient. It's not like the Mets are running out a rotation of nothing, of nobodies. I know you want certain things to go well. You need certain things to break right. Can Minaya do it again? I actually think he can. Is Senga healthy? I think he is. He needs to stay healthy. He needs to prove he's healthy. He's had some health issues going back to Japan. Can David Peterson do it again? I'm a little more skeptical to that than I am with Minaya, but let's see. I think Frankie Montas is what Frankie Montas is. I also like his stuff upside, and I think you put him in the pitching lab. Let's see. And I think Clay Holmes is going to be a sleeper. I think he has two elite pitches. That is good enough to be in the rotation. If you factor, throw those balloons up, baby. He has one of the best sliders in the game. He has one of the best sinkers in the game. You get him throwing his 4-seam to give a little bit of a different look. I think he's going to be very good. So I think this rotation has not only high upside potential, I think the rotation could be better than it was last year, just as is. I know some things have to break right. And again, I'm not confident that they all will, but I am confident that whether it's now, next week, or at the trade deadline or anytime in between, the Mets are going to go get a starter if they need one. And to me, it's really no different when they get it. It really isn't. Do I think the Mets could use a number 1? I do, but I don't care when they get it. I really don't.
I know Ant put it in the comments, and I was going to say it as well. So shout out to you, Ant, over at Subway to Shea, talking about Brandon Sproat. And I wouldn't be shocked if Brandon Sproat got upwards, health pending, pitching limitations pending if they have him on account or whatever. I think he can make upwards of potentially 20 starts for this team at some point, if things, especially 20 starts, if things don't go well for the back end, like some people think that it's not going to go well. So I wouldn't be shocked if he does make a legit difference for this team by June of this year. Starting in June wouldn't shock me. Look, if we want to talk about stoppers and guys that can provide things, Dylan Cease is obviously someone that was brought up and has provided a lot in terms of number of starts, strikeouts. Like, he's provided a lot in his career. Walks at times can be a little bit much, but for the most part, a very good guy who makes all of his starts, provides innings, strikes people out, what you want. I believe per Zips, or I'm not sure if it was Zips or per code, I can't remember. He was the one who was ranked number 1 this year in terms of strikeouts, that being about 220. So would I like a Dylan Cease on my team? Of course I would. Who the hell wouldn't? But remember, people, remember this. And I put this poll out in our chat for today. I put the same exact poll out on our community page 5 days ago. 5 days ago, I put this one out, and it said, because of this report, would you do this deal? Would you trade for Dylan Cease? Dylan Cease comes back to you, but you have to give up Jose Butto, Luis Angel Acuna, and Drew Gilbert. I put that out there because it makes sense in terms of Padres want a guy that can play shortstop. They do things on the fly. They get Butto. They get another arm back at least. They gain an outfielder that they can bring up at some point, either this season or they have someone moving forward because they sold a lot of their assets to get all these big-time players when they were trying to go for it completely. Okay? The votes came back. 136 votes came back. 51% to 49%. Nearly split, with the majority, whether it was a vote or two, the majority saying, no, that's too much for 1 year of a player. You cannot as a fan, bitch and moan about not having something, and then when an opportunity arises, and that's what you have, that being Jose Butto, 14 games of Luis Angel Acuna, and Drew Gilbert, who's coming off of a hurt season. If that's what it costs, and this is hypothetical, maybe the Padres probably want more, but I'm just saying that as a hypothetical, and Mets fans have the nerve to say, no, that's too much. You want to stop her, but now you're going to tell me that's too much. I go to our poll today as we have it right now. 75 votes in, okay? A little bit less than the 136, but the same exact deal. 3 for 1. 53% to 47% vote no. It's too much. You can't complain about the pitching and then tell me, no, I want to modify this deal and give up shit to get what I want instead.
Right.
You can't have your cake and eat it too, Mets fans. I'm sorry. You cannot. So if you want something, you have to go out and get something. And if that's what it costs, look, I am all about dealing if it makes sense. That deal that I put out there, I knew, and this is where I chose this, I knew Mets fans would say it's too much. I would drive all three of those guys to San Diego myself in my shitty Elantra, and we would go all the way there, and I would say, I'll bring it back, Dylan, if you want, or no, I'll pay you private, fly back to New York, I'll drive back by myself. I would do that deal in a heartbeat. I don't think the Padres would do that deal.
No.
I don't think it's enough. And the problem with
I think the Padres probably want, I think you'd have to give up a better pitching prospect instead of Drew Gilbert. I think they want, because I think the first two guys they would take. It's the kind of deal that they make all the time. Preller likes to do this kind of thing where they take guys to the final year of their contract and then they flip them, but they're not rebuilding. You got to remember that. This is not a team in San Diego. They're a team in flux because their owner died, and they're a team in flux because they spent so much money on bad contracts like Jake Cronenworth and shit like that. I understand that part of it, but they are a team that is trying to win. So they want a guy like Jose Butto because they can put him in the rotation right now. They want a guy like Tyler McGill. They could plug him into the rotation right now in a short-term fix for losing Dylan Cease. Now, look, that does not obviously equate to losing a pitcher the caliber of Dylan Cease. That's why they're going to want a pitching prospect who will eventually have a ceiling that is similar to the guy that they're giving up. Now, I think Luis Angel Acuna is a kind of guy that they would want because they can either play him at shortstop and they can keep Bogarts at second, or they can put Bogarts back at shortstop and they can put Acuna at second. That makes sense to them. I think there are some machinations of that deal that make sense. And look, if your answer to this is no, because like Richard says, you just don't want to trade for 1 year rentals, I can get behind that because Cease is a rental. He's a Scott Boras client. Yes. He's 29, going to be 30 years old. He's going to want a big deal. Odds are, if you look at Stearns' history, he's not going to want to pay a 30-year-old pitcher an 8-year contract. So the Mets are not going to keep Dylan Cease, more than likely. So he would be a true 1 year rental. And if your thought is, I don't want to give up that for a 1 year rental, and you have a full stop at that line, I can get behind it. But otherwise, it'd be, I'm with you. You have to give to get. And I don't hug any prospects. I would trade any one of those prospects to go out and get a guy like Dylan Cease.
The issue that this fan base needs to understand is that all the blame that you want to place at the feet of David Stearns, because you're like, this guy doesn't want to do anything, he's hugging prospects, it's this, it's that. It's not, and I said this on Queens Baseball, by way of the Pope the other day, when they were talking about this, and I said it's not hugging prospects. It's the fact that nobody wants your prospects. There's a major difference here that Mets fans do not understand. And then they modify it to the point where they give up the garbage that they're already offering in comparison to what other teams offer. You are not going to get these top-end players because your farm system, as Ant put in the comments before, it slipped to 12. At one point, it was 5th, slipped to 10. Now it's 12. It's kind of going down. Everyone had off years. Everyone was hurt. Look, there are good things that are happening within this system, but this team, as I continue to say, and I'm not just holding this team's water like some people think I do on here, they do not develop well, especially from the hitting side. They have not developed well. So when you look at some of these numbers and some of these hitters, they're not the prettiest barrel rates, not the prettiest EV rates, like not good stuff. So you can't tell me that the guy's hugging. It's more so he knows he doesn't have enough yet. So he's hoping that if I hold a little bit longer, if they can show me something, then maybe I can actually finish a deal. Then maybe I don't have to give up 4/5 of the top end of my top 10 to get a player, whether it's for 1 year or multiple years. Because the Mets' best offer is quantity. They don't have the quality yet. And the best guy of quality right now is Brandon Sproat. And that's the guy that I just said that I think is going to make 20 starts for this team this year and could be a difference maker. They're not getting rid of him. They're not going to get rid of a tall righty that throws 100 miles an hour with nasty secondaries. They're not getting rid of that, and nor should they. Because if they do, then you're going to keep playing this game of signing the Frankie Montases of the world. That pisses Mets fans off even more. And like, well, why don't you develop guys? Well, they just traded the guy because you want to trade people so bad because you keep on saying, we hug these prospects. Just trade them. They're not going to trade Sproat. They're going to trade other guys. They can, but they're not at a point yet where anybody wants them. You have to have a commodity that somebody wants. And the one that people want, you don't want to give up. And I don't blame you for that. Because
and they also, they can't afford to give him up. That's the thing. To your point, they have not drafted and developed starting pitching well lately. For a franchise that historically has drafted and developed starting pitching very well, from the Tom Seavers and the Jerry Kuzmans and the Gary Gentrys and the Nolan Ryans and the Doc Goodins, all the way down to Jacob deGrom and Matt Harvey and Noah Syndergaard, they have not done this well lately. You cannot afford to give up a guy who can potentially be in your rotation very soon, especially when your GM/president of baseball operations does not have the appetite, nor should he, to give 30-year-old starting pitchers 8-year deals.
The one thing I'll throw out real quick, because I know people are saying that, we can make a deal at the deadline. I don't know if this team can land Cease at the deadline.
Yes, thank you. I know Syndergaard was a trade, my bad, but you know what I'm saying.
I don't know if this team can land Cease at the deadline, and their best option and their best opportunity would potentially be now, which I understand it's a tough spot for David Stearns because odds are they're probably asking for Sproat. That's my guess right now. That's what they're asking for. And I understand why. To Tone's points before, how this guy has made every start since 2020, and he strikes everybody out, and he's got good numbers, and he can be viewed as a frontline guy. So they're asking for a lot because you get the entire year. I understand that. But the problem that this team's going to run into, and why Mets fans are still going to be pissed off at the deadline, they got a better shot at landing a different type of pitcher as opposed to a Cease at the deadline, in my opinion, as I sit here on February the 5th. And I say that because unless these guys in the minors show out and improve their overall stock, I don't think the Mets' quantity of player is going to win at the deadline. At that point, the Padres' mindset will change, and they'll say, we're not looking for 3 top 25 prospects because at this point, you're only getting 2 months of a player, of a Scott Boras client who's hitting free agency. you're not going to get the most players out of someone. You're at that point, you're looking for quality. You're looking for what's the best player that I can get. And that then puts the Mets at a disadvantage because other teams can jump them in that spot. That's where they could get jumped by somebody like Baltimore.
Right.
That's where they could get jumped by guys who have better things to offer someone, even though they're only getting from 2 months. Those teams are better flush with talent that they can say, I'll give you this one guy, and they'll take that over what the Mets can offer. And I see you in the comments, Tone, saying Pablo shouldn't cost a lot. And you're right. The Twins are kind of in flux with ownership, with money. They're trying to cut things. I love Pablo Lopez. I think the Mets can match up a little bit there. I have to look at the Twins system overall on the things that they need. But there could be a match there, and it makes sense. I would gladly take Pablo. But you could be looking elsewhere as opposed to a cease.
But here's the thing, Ibby. Like Pantry says this with regards to the Padres, but I think you can apply this even to a thing with Pablo Lopez, where again he shouldn't cost as much. Saying the Padres are def, like this is just an opinion from Pantry's. Padres are def looking for Sproat and/or Tong and maybe even McLean, along with 2 or 3 of our shittier prospects. Now, who knows? That's just one person's opinion, but that's what all of these teams are going to ask for. They're gonna ask for Sproat. They're gonna ask for Tong. They're gonna ask for McLean. I don't know how high I am on a guy like Jet Williams. I think he's a fine prospect. I don't think he's a great prospect. Right now, no one wants Jet Williams because
I do.
He would, but you know what I'm saying? Like in a trade, Jet Williams isn't moving the needle. He was hurt all year last year. Nobody wants Drew Gilbert. He was hurt all year last year. Right now, today, Drew Gilbert might be the second coming of Barry Bonds. He's obviously not, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But no one knows what he is right now, so no one wants him right now as the headliner of a package. They're going to say, yeah, we'll take Drew Gilbert and Jet Williams and Jonah Tong because that's what they want. They want enough. They want the arm and they want quantity because they don't know what the quality is. Any one of these guys could be very good, could not be very good. But right now, you cannot worry about trying to, you cannot trade one of these guys going like, oh, that's the guy. Jet Williams gets it done. I don't think so. I don't think they want them right now. Right now. And it's not to knock any of these guys as prospects, but again, they're coming off hurt years.
I do plan on getting in contact with I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's fantastic when it comes to breaking down prospects from a fantasy perspective, and just he's at these games. So if you don't follow Chris Clegg on Twitter, you should, because he's fantastic. And I do plan on getting him on the show. I spoke with him for a little bit to talk a little bit more about these Mets prospects because I have questions, mainly because I know this fan base has opinions on our prospects, and I know that the industry views them a certain way, and I would love to get his input on why he feels the certain ways that he does about our system overall, and I think it would be a great guest. So in the coming weeks, I do plan on getting him on here to get a little bit of a different perspective as opposed to having Joe DeMayo on, who's fantastic. He's Met-driven. And I'm bringing in someone a little bit different just to get another perspective because I like getting the overall balance of where the industry sees the players that could be the stars for us tomorrow or the guys that are used as lottery tickets to get us better things. So like I said, in the coming weeks, I hope to get Chris Clegg on the show to continue this conversation on our farm system.
I want to jump into the comments here. A couple good ones. Tone saying Cronenworth plays first, throw him in. I don't care what his contract is. Get me my number one. You do not want anywhere near Jake Cronenworth and his contract. Jake Cronenworth is 31 years old. Jake Cronenworth is signed through 2030.
He got an 8-year deal.
He got an 8-year deal. He's like having Jeff McNeil on an 8-year deal. You think Jeff McNeil's a bad deal? I wouldn't touch.
Cronenworth's better than Jay, or better than
he's
Jeff.
A better player than Jeff McNeil, but
yeah.
He's not a better player than Jeff McNeil adjusted for the contract he currently has. You want to pay him until he's 38 years old?
No, I don't. But I think that
touch that with
in general,
a 39 and a half foot pole. No shot. Absolutely zero chance. I can't stomach that. There's no way.
7 years, 80.
7 years, 80. Yeah, he signed. No, it's insane. This
so
one from Zero Cool. I cannot wait until the Mets prospect mash and all these big mouths shitting on them. Shut the fuck up. I hope.
Shut the fuck up.
I hope all
Zero. I back these guys for the most part. I back them. I
don't love any. I have not loved a Mets prospect since Francisco Alvarez. And again, I'm not a prospect guy the way Joe DeMayo or even Ibby is. I thought Alvarez was a great prospect. I thought Vientos and Mauricio were very good prospects. I'm not super high on some of these position player prospects the way other people are. Carlos has been saying in the comments he loves Drew Gilbert. Other people have been saying in the comments you can't trade Luis Angel Acuna. Other people are saying in the comments you can't trade Jet Williams. I am not super high on any of these guys, but I'm also not super down on any of them, Ibby. I think they're all okay prospects. But here's my question, Ibby, and I will gladly be wrong. As I have said before, I'd rather be happy than right. Jet Williams could be the second coming of Dustin Pedroia, or even better, whatever. Great. Here's my question, though. How do we know these prospects? What shows you these prospects are going to mash? What about anything these prospects have shown that these prospects are going to quote unquote mash? And when you add to the fact that the Mets have actually been pretty successful with Alvarez and Vientos, it lowers the chances that these prospects who are in their peer group are going to be good. Prospects do not pan out at this rate. They just don't. They're not all going to mash.
I don't know who said it in the comments before, but they were saying how, after my comment of saying how the Mets don't develop hitters, and then they listed off hitters, of course, whether it's the Alonsos, the Nimos, the Confortos of the world. It's like, yes, you picked out a handful of guys, and you would also know that, from a percentage standpoint over the last 15 years or whatever it was, whenever the study was put out, that the Mets were like bottom 3 in producing major league ball players, where Houston was number 1 at like a 26% clip or something, and the Mets were down at the bottom at like a 4% clip, if not less, of producing major league players. So that's kind of the point that I'm getting at when it comes to developing guys. And yes, we have had some hitters come along the way. We've also had a lot of hitters just not pan out and things that just didn't work. So look, I'm not sitting here bashing our prospects. I'm saying that at some point, yes, you do have to deal from them. It has to make sense, and they have to have actual value in order to deal them. Unlike a lot of people, I like Jet Williams. I think he is something. And when I talk to other people that are within this industry and, have a standing when it comes to prospects, they are all very high on him. I'm curious, and that's a question I'll ask Chris Clegg when we get him on, you have very high hopes for Jet Williams. Others have very high hopes for Jet Williams. Can you explain to this Met fan base who for some reason thinks he stinks? Can you tell me why you are so high on him as a ball player? Because I think it's a very interesting question, because there is a huge disconnect from a fan base versus a player versus what the industry says a player can be. And I think a majority of people that just don't like the guy, it's because he's short. I think it's unfair just because a guy is short that everyone comps him to Jose Altuve or Dustin Pedroia. That is an impossible thing to do, and it's unfair to the player. I think he could be a good player as a second baseman. I think he can hit, 12 home runs or whatever, steal 30-plus bags, and be a second baseman. And you'll take that from that position. You don't have to pay for that. You'll take that. But, I just think that people are very
but okay, just to play devil's advocate, Ibby.
Go ahead.
I agree. Again, I've said this on the show a million times. I always used to use Gavin Lux as the example when he was still on the Dodgers. Obviously, he's no longer on the Dodgers. If you are going to start to pay a bunch of money to, outside free agents and guys like that you're going to extend, the Lindors, the Sotos, you're going to start, you need to have guys who aren't necessarily stars filling in other spots. So if you had a second baseman and his name was Jet Williams and he was playing on the league minimum and going through his arbitration and he was stealing 30 bags, playing, let's say, a well above average defense, hitting 12 home runs, whatever, that's good. That is a very productive player in your lineup. but that does not make for an untouchable trade piece either. A second baseman who hits 12 home runs and steals 30 bags is not somebody that you cannot trade. And I'm not saying that you said you cannot trade him.
Right.
I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that you said you wouldn't trade him, because you said, even though you like him, you would trade him in the right deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I would.
So I think that's where the disconnect starts with some of this stuff. Like,
go to this deal right here. Remove Acuna, put Jet Williams. I still do the deal.
Right.
I still do it. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's where people are missing the point. It's not to say that, again, like to bring up Zero's comment from before, like all these guys are going to mash. A guy who hits 12 home runs is not mashing. And I'm just using that as an example because that's the number you said. A guy who hits 12 home runs is not somebody you can't comprehend trading.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good prospect. If the Mets have, let's say the Mets sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next year to a $450 million contract.
Ooh.
That's an expensive first baseman. They've got an expensive right fielder. They've got an expensive shortstop. They've got an expensive left fielder. They're going to need Mark Vientos to continue doing what he's doing. They're going to need Francisco Alvarez to continue doing what he's doing. They're going to need somebody to come up and play second base, whether it's Acuna or Jet Williams or somebody else we don't know about, to do that job. They're going to need these guys to fill in and be adequate players to offset the ton of money that you're paying to other people around the diamond. But you have to understand that you also can trade some of these guys. You can't trade the guys who can't miss. You can't trade the guys who maybe could hit 30 home runs at catcher like Francisco Alvarez. You can trade a second baseman who might hit 12 home runs in the big leagues. Like, you can do it. And I'm not shitting on him because he's short. I'm short. He's 5'6". I'm also 5'6". I'm not shitting on the guy. I'm just saying you just need to put it in perspective. Yes. And I understand this is fair. 12 home runs with a 390 on base percentage and a 125 OPS is an all-star. Sure.
But again, that's the Jet Williams 90th percentile. Like, that's
correct.
It. Once this player shows out, like, is he going to be like, I don't know. Like, that could be his best season. Like, look, this is coming. I like Jet. I'm not shitting on him. I want him to be the second baseman of the future. I do. But if it comes down to, having something that makes sense and making a call, and making a deal that gets us better in another area, whether it's a starter or whatever happens during a given season, like, you have to be willing to do things. And again, it's the price to play. Like, if you want something, if you want to get better in another spot, you have to be willing to make a deal. Otherwise, you're treading water. Then that's what ends up happening.
This comment came in way earlier. It's about the Mets signing Nick Madrigal to a split contract, right? So I don't think it's a big deal. Guys, it's a split contract. He makes X amount if he's in the minors, X amount if he's in the majors, blah, 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 blah. They sign him for depth. He's a good defender, plus defender at a lot of places. But Ibby, I just want to throw this out there. He did hit 221 last year, which was not great. He had a negative 0.4 WAR. But for his career, he's a 3 WAR player, mostly because he plays very good defense, but he also is a career 274 hitter, but he has no punch on the baseball. This is also a guy who at one point was a top prospect. He was the number 4 overall draft pick, and he's 5'8". There's no guarantee that Jet Williams won't be Nick fucking Madrigal. Talking about being 27 years old on his 3rd team on a split contract. I'm not saying he's going to be, but Acuna could easily be Nick Madrigal.
Good.
Jet Williams could easily be Nick Madrigal.
Good.
People
good.
that are, and they easily could not be, but there is more likelihood that they will be than they won't be, right? Like, because that's just how it works.
Of course. That's the way it goes. Sure.
So I just want people to just understand that part of it. He's not old, and he's got tools. He's got the defensive tool. He puts bat on ball at a pretty high rate. 274 career hitter for a guy with limited opportunities. Not bad, but he's got no punch. He's 5'8". I don't know. These guys are going to have to, like you said, that's the 95th percentile or whatever for Jet Williams. being, hitting 390 on base percentage and a 125. Like if he does that, terrific, but I don't know that he's going to. So just let's all just chill. Let's all just chill with some of this.
And also, again, when it comes down to, like I said, the dealings of players, there has to be a want from other teams, a willingness to take on a player. It's the point I'm making is you don't see a lot of teams knocking on the Mets' door for certain players. Like you don't. Like teams are knocking down others' doors for players that they have coming up because they're special and they project out to be difference makers. It's why Boston has what they have, and the White Sox were like, yeah, we want Roman Anthony, we want Christian Campbell, we want Marcelo Mayer, like we want these guys. And they're like, yeah, well, we're not going to give you those. We'll give you Kyle Teal, we'll give you some other pieces. So like, okay, those guys are still good too. We'll take them. Let's because they have guys that are in demand, and they have a glut of stuff and they can actually deal from it. The Mets have a glut of middle infielders, but you have to have a want from other people, and nobody really wants it right now. They got to build up their overall what's the word I'm looking for, value, and then you can see if you can actually deal something. And to answer someone's question before, real quick, between Acuna and Williams, who do you pick? It's a good question.
That is a good question.
I think that it's a tough one to answer from a standpoint of one being at the major league level and one not being. From all the people that have put out information and have gone deep on both players, those numbers say that they feel that Jet Williams is going to be better. From what we saw, Luis Acuna is someone that may have gotten bored at the minor league level and decided to show up at the major league level because, as John has put before, once those big bright lights are on, players of that ilk, they step up and they realize what they can be. Acuna was a top flight prospect for the Rangers. He made the transition over to the Mets. He stunk in the minors for the Mets, even though he was doing pretty solid for the Rangers. Maybe that changeover caused a little bit of, you're moving, you got a lot of stuff going on, you try to get your comfort back in or whatever. Maybe he finally settled in by the time he got called up. To stay true to what I've been saying, I would probably choose Jet over Acuna, even though in the end, I think both players are very comparable. So I don't really have a preference because I think in the end, you're going to get similar production from either player.
This is a tough position to be in because I think the way the Mets are currently constituted and moving into the future, because current constitution doesn't matter as much because these are both young players. But I think it's going to be very hard for the Mets to keep both players. Lindor obviously isn't going anywhere, so I don't think either one of them
will be gone. Yeah,
at shortstop. Now, I know they both offer you positional versatility because they can play second, they can play short, and they both seem like guys who can play center field. The tricky part is, and again, I'm not dumping on guys who are small, you really can't have a 5'6" center fielder in Major League Baseball.
No, you can't. I agree with that.
That's too small to play center field. It's not too small to play second base. It's too small to play center field, though, on a day-in, day-out basis. So I don't think you can carry both guys. And I think your point on both of them is fair, and it shows the good and the bad with all prospects, the ups and the downs of all prospects. Because, look, if you look at minor league numbers, if you look at statistical comps that Zero Cool is throwing out there a couple times as a phrase, which is an important one in how you judge prospects, I'm not being a dick when I say it. If you look at that and their minor league careers, Jet Williams should be your pick. But if you look at baseball pedigree, now no one's going to accuse Luis Angel Acuna of being Ronald Acuna. You're not going to say that. But they are in the same family. Their dad was a professional baseball player, not at this high a level, but was. So I think when you look at the baseball pedigree and you look at the fact that some guys turn it on when the lights get brighter, especially guys who are from families like that, where you can bank, where you could track it and say, I could see how a guy whose older brother's a superstar, who grew up around baseball his whole life, might be a little bored at AAA. You could draw a direct line and say, yeah, I could see how Luisangel Acuna might be a little bored in the minor leagues. So it becomes a very hard pick. It's almost a coin flip because what you're looking at from both guys is the opposite thing. Right now with Jet Williams, you have no major league career to go off of. With Luisangel Acuna, you have a very small major league career sample size, but you do have a guy who turned it on the most when it was the most important. Luisangel Acuna had, for all intents and purposes, a terrible year in AAA. He comes to the Mets in the middle of a pennant race when Lindor, the best player on their team and a guy who's fighting for an MVP, goes down, and he plays for like 12 games and the Mets don't miss a beat.
He did great.
He did great. So this is a great question. I'm trying to not let recency bias me, but I am going to go with the fact that I'm a believer in bright lights, guys. So if you asked me to pick, I'm going to say Acuna is the better prospect. And again, I'm not trying to do that off recency bias, and I'm not doing it off of a 12-game sample size. That's insane. I'm going off of major league pedigree that runs through that family, and the fact that some guys just have, you want to call it, Luisangel Acuna might have it. Might be that simple.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. And I want to bring up Zero Cool's comment real quick, saying how, they signed Soto to 15 years. How is that win now? Zero, is that to people in the chat, or do you think that we are saying that this team needs to trade everybody and get players now to win now? Because that's far from what I've said on this show for the longest time. Like, I understand that it's not so much a win now thing. And I've said that, I came into this offseason saying that 2025 was not going to be a win now at all costs because you made the NLCS and you signed Soto. I said it's a long. Okay,
it's to the chat. I thought it was to the chat too, because a lot of people were describing it as that.
Wasn't sure. Yeah.
Listen, I said it was. Yeah. You could go in this direction and be, you picked Jet, I picked Acuna. Paul Revere's got another, let's call it literal and figurative measuring stick, and says, let's make it simple. If a player does not reach my horse's shoulders, we don't want him. There, settled. You know what? That's you can't stand shoulder to shoulder.
I'm 6'1". Do I reach it? I think I'm good. I think I'm okay then. I think I would make it.
I think you're okay. I think I would be in trouble.
I think I'd be okay.
And it's a good, let me just say this for all baseball players. It's a good thing Paul Revere rode a horse and not a moose, because there ain't many people in the world who can reach a moose's shoulder. You're looking at like Shaq, the Big Show. Ibby, look, we got to a lot of stuff today. I didn't think we were going to do 2 hours, but we damn near just about did it. And that's a shout out to the chat, because the chat kept the conversation moving. The chat kept the conversation interesting. I do want to bring this up from Carlos, because he said, Ibby, quick question off topic, LOL. Where do you buy the hats that are $59.50 but low profile?
You can search for those wherever you get your hats at, usually lids. I get a lot of stuff from 47 as well. Hatland is another place. But a majority of my hats are not low profile. I think I bought one recently that was low profile.
Is that low profile? It looks like
this is not. Be. It's not. No, this is a regular snapback hat that, as you can see, is the same logo that is going to be on the Mets spring training hat, which looks awesome, by the way. I have the black and blue version because this was put on sale at the Mets team store, and I've had this for a while now, and I love this hat. And shout out to the Mets for finally leaning into the fun aspect, which what a spring training hat should be. So those who don't like it, stop showing your age. But a spring training hat should be fun. So the fact that theirs is orange and blue, it's leaning into a fun thing with Mr. Met. Like, that's cool. And but yeah, this is not low profile, but you can definitely find low profile hats online by simply just typing it in and going to sites, like I said, like Lids, Hatland, 47, anything like that.
I think just to further that, Yeah, Carlos, some of the 5950s are low profile. I think if you look like on New Era's site directly, because they make the on-field cap, you can buy either version of the on-field cap. Some players prefer the low profile and some don't. So I think for all of the 5950s, if I'm not mistaken, or at least the vast majority of them, if you go directly to New Era, you will have the opportunity to go low profile or not. That's just for the on the field caps. Like, this is not a low profile hat. I don't prefer them most of the time. So that's just my preference, but yeah. Ibby, you mentioned the Mets and their jerseys. Let's end on this. We talked a little bit about the Mets blue alternate that they went with, that they unveiled at Amazing Day. But now we find out via the MLB The Show trailer really was the first place we got an inkling of this. They showed Jeff McNeil making a tag at second base, and the uniform looked different. The Mets have also altered their road grays, and the road grays that the Mets wear are very clean, super good, great uniform. And I think they made them better. I think the road grays are actually better now than they were. Subtle adjustments, but I love the multiple color piping on the pants and on the sleeves and on the neckline. It's good.
Yeah, the return of that racing stripe, I really think it looks awesome. I did bring up some slides. Thanks to UniWatch over on Twitter or X. Fantastic follow if you like me and you like logos and jerseys and stuff like that. They're always breaking things down, what they think looks good, bad, and just the overall history of logos and stuff. So bringing up, obviously, the Mets home uni, still the same, looking
great jersey,
pinstripe. Then we have, of course, the black alternate. There were rumors that they were thinking about bringing back the white shadow backdrop, but that did not end up being true.
They
returning to what they had last year. They should. I think it pops it more, but that did look better than I thought it would look.
It did. I didn't like it when they first removed it, and I was like, oh, this doesn't look good. It actually looks better than I thought it would. I don't hate it, but I think it would look better still with the white, especially if it's only a home jersey. They're only wearing the black jerseys at home. I think it needs the white outline. But back to the rest of the unis.
Yeah, so bringing in the subtle change to the road grays, which we can see here, and you can see around the collar, around the arm, of course, down the pant leg. You can see now the orange strip that's brought in. Looks really sharp. It's very, and obviously, again, losing the blue down the buttons. We've lost that in replace to just keeping it the clean New York across the front. I think it looks great. I think it looks awesome. It's a very, very small, subtle change, but it goes so far. And to John's dismay, I have to bring up the road blue alternates. Like I said, they would have the gray pants, and they do, because now they have the race stripe with the orange as well. So you can say it does kind of play. It's okay to have the gray.
But I did say that, though, Ibby.
You did.
I did say if they were going to wear gray pants with the blue uniform tops, that they needed to incorporate both the orange and the blue in the pants, because otherwise it kind of doesn't make sense, just because the jersey has no gray in it. And so the pants just look a little out of place if they're just gray or gray with blue piping. I think it's a little odd. I know people are, down on some, high on others. I like both changes. I like that they swung big with the all blue alternates. I would have liked a little bit of gray maybe in the numbers and in the letters. But once the players put them on at Amazing Day, I think they look pretty good. And I think if you're going to wear the gray pants, I do think the piping down the side looks good with the multicolor piping.
I agree. And for me, the one thing I love the return of the script. I know some people don't. I think it would read a lot better if we had the letters filled in. I'm not a fan of the transparent lettering or numbers.
Like the blue on blue.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. Sometimes I think it can come across, not as legible, especially on TV, or especially if you're actually watching him at the field or whatever, but at the stadium. But for me, that's the one downfall. So yeah, if you wanted to fill that in with a gray, I think it would have looked proper, especially to go with the gray pants. Just I like when the letters and numbers are actually filled as opposed to just the color of the jersey. That's my one downfall.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll say this. I just think we're not going to spend too much time on this. We'll get out of here in a minute. But Nike and Fanatics have done a horrendous job across the board. Most jerseys that they make are terrible now. There's mistakes all the time when you try to order authentic jerseys from Fanatics. It's brutal. A lot of the changes that they have made to other teams' jerseys, a lot of the City Connects are the most ugly abominations I've ever seen. I think Mets fans, whether you like the jersey discourse or you don't like the jersey discourse, you care what they wear, you don't care what they wear, you like the alternates, you like tradition, you like the City Connects, whatever. Maybe I'm just going to say this. The Mets have escaped this scenario very well for what this could have been in terms of Nike and Fanatics making jerseys and being responsible for the redesign of jerseys. You can nitpick some of the things on the all blue alternate. I tend to agree, but I think overall they did a good job. And I think, like I said, the changes to the gray road unis, I think, are picture perfect. Removing the blue trim and removing the white trim on the black home jerseys, again, a controversial take when they first did it, but I do think they look better on the field than I thought they would look. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But again, just with some of the things that they are rolling out for other teams, the Mets are in pretty good shape. I think all the City Connect jerseys are by and large stupid, although there are ones that I like better than others. And I think the Mets are in the top half, if not better than that, in terms of, I don't know if maybe they're definitely in the top 15. They might be in the top 10. I think if I sat down and did all of them, they're not my favorite City Connect jerseys, but they're definitely not among the worst. I do think all of them are pretty stupid. But again, the Mets escaped with a pretty good jersey out of all this, because some of the other ones are fucking brutal, dude.
And I always say, when it comes to stuff like this, whether it's logos, whether it's jerseys, simple always wins out. Simple always looks the best. And I think for what we have and what we're going to be watching for the next year and whatever we have going forward, these are very simple looks, and simple and clean is what looks great. And to Charlie's point as well, saying, all the things we're talking about, whether it is, jerseys, colors, logos, the heights of players, as Al Davis says, just win, baby. And you're right. Just win ball games. Look, we want our teams to look good. For me, that's just who I am. I love logos and stuff like that. So I always have an affinity for stuff like this because I want it to look cool at the same time. But you're right. Just win ball games. Go out there and wear a fucking paper bag. I don't care. Just win. I don't care what you're doing.
Don't wear a paper bag.
But still.
But still,
just win the damn ball games. Beat the crap out of teams. That's what I want to see. But luckily for us, our boys in blue are going to look good. So it's good stuff. I love it.
It's a beautiful day here at Citi Field for opening day. The Toronto Blue Jays take the field in their traditional road grays. They've got blue numbers and letters outlined in red trim. And here come the Mets taking the field in their traditional brown paper bags, what they wear every opening day.
That's you know what? You're right. That was more so for the years of 2009 to 2014. That was more for those years.
Couple good ones before we get out of here. Armand saying the Red Sox, the Rockies are getting new City Connects, as are the Washington Nationals. And that's, I think, some of the good with the bad, Ibby. The Red Sox City Connects, they had the first ones. They were abysmal. But the Rockies and the Washington Nationals, I thought, were two of the best. Yeah. I love the Rockies. I love the mountains. I thought the green was cool. I thought the green pants, when they switched from that, was dumb. I thought they should have leaned into it. And I love the gray and the pink with the cherry blossoms on the Washington Nationals one. I thought those were two of the nicest ones. See with the Red Sox, I know the Red Sox are supposed to have some green in theirs, or be all green Monster inspired. I think that'll be cooler. Then I think it was what was it? Was it Boston Marathon?
It's the Boston Marathon, yeah.
Which I understand the tragedy at the Boston Marathon and stuff like that. Like conceptually,
it was a big swing. It was definitely a big swing and different.
I just didn't like the execution of it. So but obviously I understand why they did it. Paul Revere saying, do they make these uniforms in extra small for Jet and Acuna? They actually don't. So they have to wear players the size of Jet and Acuna and myself. We actually have to wear the onesies that they make for the kids, and they snap in underneath and like in the crotch. So it's really difficult to go to the bathroom during games. It's very hard.
Just looking at Paul Revere's comment here also, just my opinion. John Nibby have the best personalities for this type of program. Both are very good, and both are very different in height. See, height does not matter. It's true. It still works.
That's just how it goes. Just how it goes. Ibby, anything we didn't get to before we get out of here?
Nothing really. I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover. Shout out to the 561, which I'll make a note of here. That's our high point. 561 being here with us today across both platforms, that being YouTube as well as X, Twitter, what have you. Shout out to our brand new subscribers. We're still inching closer towards 1250, trying to get there. We're 4 subs away. If you haven't already, make sure you sub the channel. I would love to hit 1250. Shout out to the ones that did like the video while you were here. We did hit 50, which is always my goal now, to hit at least 50 likes on the video before we end the stream, which we did. So shout out to all of you for doing that. You guys were awesome today. We weren't sure exactly how this show was going to go because of the lack of content to give you guys, but I feel like all things considered, we had a lot of fun. And I said to John before we went on today, I said, let's go with the flow of the chat today. Let's let them be the drivers and let's see where they take us. And you guys did a fantastic job. So shout out to all of you. Shout out to the 560 total, and all love to you guys. And of course, let's go Mets.
Absolutely. And you know what, Ibby? Hopefully next week, I doubt it, but hopefully next week we can talk about Pete Alonso being a part of the New York Mets. I think that's where this is going to end inevitably. It's just a matter of time. So hopefully that's where this conversation can go next week. I do think, I'm not putting a time on it, but I do think the most obvious best course of action for both player and team is for Pete to be on the Mets. I'm trying to move on mentally just for my own sanity. And I think we all should. I know people are giving up on it already. I just think that it's going to make too much sense for both parties to pass that up. So you nailed it. If you missed any of the show, we're about to end it. You can go back and watch anything you missed on the same YouTube channel called Til Mets Do Us Part. You can also follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on TikTok. You can follow us on Blue Sky. It's all at Til Mets Do Us Part. If you're on Blue Sky, you know their handles work a little differently, but if you just search Til Mets Do Us Part, the first part of it is at Til Mets Do Us Part, at Blue Sky app, whatever is the ending part of it. But you can follow us on all social medias at Til Mets Do Us Part. And of course, if you missed any of the show and you want to listen to the show on your way to work or whatever while you're at the gym tomorrow, we will drop early in the morning as an audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all of those good places. So that's Ibby. I'm John. This is Til Mets Do Us Part. We'll see you next week.